got things to discuss. So recently a video came up around of a rapier bout that went wrong. Really wrong. Like exceptionally bad. And I want to come at this discussion, put my grain of salt, contribute to the safety of the HEMA community with this video. I'm not going to do much of a difference because this channel right now is puny, but I'll do what I can. I want to come at this from the perspective of a bladesmith who also fences, but who is primarily a bladesmith that studies the historical antiques, the actual material culture of historical European martial arts. Now, first of all, what was the problem? In my opinion, the problem was the blade itself, the rapier blade. There's a lot of people who say that you need to have safety tips, or that you need to have certain techniques, or that tournaments should advocate for more control. But as a bladesmith, as someone who understands and has used and makes a shit ton of blades, I can tell you that this is wrong. How do I know this? Because I've tested it. In order to bring validity to my hypothesis, I will show you two swords. Here is one. This is my practice spadroon. I've recently put a new handle on it and a new shell on it in order to protect my hand against someone else trying to thrust at me. And here I have my sharp spadroon, which I honestly just call a small sword. Very short, very small for even a small sword. It's got a very short blade when compared to the rest of the small swords. But even with this considered, this should be more flexible. Why isn't it? Well, it all comes down to the distal taper, one of the most neglected topics in HEMA, in my opinion, as a bladesmith. So first of all, I want you to look at this spadroon and tell me, do you think that this is going to go through a fencing jacket? Look at how much this thing flops. Look at how I can literally impale myself and the thing bends instead of going through my shirt. Look at how I can push it into my hand despite it not having a tip or any blunt. This is just 2 mil. And even so, I can jam it into my hand pretty strongly and nothing happens. Why is that? Flexibility. That's why. Historically, the 1796 pattern of spadroon was very criticized because it didn't have a proper distal taper that would allow it to go through the clothing of the time. Reminder, this is the Napoleonic Wars. Everyone was wearing a greatcoat. It was much colder in Europe. So you need something that can go through the clothing. And what's that you need? Then what do you need to get through thick clothing? Stiffness. You need something that is not going to bend. Now this here does not bend much. Here in the foible it bends, but you can see, of course I'm not going to push it into my hand because it's sharp, but you can see just how much stiffer this is when compared to this. This I need literally no force to just make it bend, while this needs, it just doesn't bend. It's a joke to even consider bending this. And therefore, you have a blade here that, if blunted, would not be safe for sparring. This does not bend at all. This is a weapon. And I believe that the rapier used in that video was also too stiff. For the simple reason that when it struck against the other weapon, when it flexed, when it thrust, it did not offer any sort of flex. While this, just by moving it, just by making your standard disengage, you see the flex. You see the flex there. You see how it flops up and down. You see how it moves with a certain amount of bend into the blade because it's, you know, very thin steel with no distal taper, meant to be flexible. And I've used these blades. This one I've used to spar so many times. Other blades similar to this that I've used for sparring, this little Bauernwehr Messer hanger thing. This has an even thinner tip. This has even a thinner blade in a really fine tip. And even so, this one's even floppier. Just look at this. I have legitimately thrust, in fact there's a video here in this channel where with this blade I went up and just thrust someone full force who was only wearing a shirt. The thing bounced off him and got ripped out of my hand. And it did nothing. Didn't even scratch the shirt. I asked the guy if he was okay, he was fine. Why? Because of this. Before I was very negative about flexible blades because they were not historically accurate. And for the sharp material culture, I remain with that point. Sharp swords were stiff, especially sharp thrusting swords. The reason why the 1796 Padroon got criticized a lot was because it was a flexible, floppy thing in the Napoleonic Wars, where everyone was wearing that damn greatcoat. That thing ain't easy to just run someone through. No, you need something that's stiff in order to get through that resistance. This is a much better thrusting weapon than this. Another example. And I think that one of the best examples I have in this wall is this blade when compared to this blade. With this, I would not dare thrust. I would not. This would be far too stiff. Why would it be too stiff? Because it is short. Despite it having absolutely no distal taper and a really thin blade, this thing is even stiffer than my sharp small sword / Padroon. Theoretically, this would be even harder because the thing is heavier. There's more mass. There's more danger. No, look at this. Look at this floppy thing. The length is also a big factor here. Yeah, it's not as flexible as this or the Bauernwehr. It's not as flexible, but it is far more flexible. Which is why I was astounded to see the rapier not flex. It was too stiff. It was too thick. I don't know if that rapier was a cast steel, but it was far too stiff. You do not need rubber blunts nor leather tips. What you need is a floppy blade for thrusting. In the case of styles of fencing that use a lunge, you cannot have something like this and expect to thrust with it all the time. You can with a lot of control, especially if you know how to pull back. But if you don't, and especially if you're in a tournament, you need a floppy blade. You need something that's going to do this. You need something that's going to take away from the impact. Yes, is it going to change fencing? Of course it's going to change the fencing. But what would we rather have? very slow thrusts that do not require a lot of force, that are very artificial, or do we want an intense bout? The problem is not technique. It isn't mentality. It's not the rubber blunts or heavier jackets. The problem is that specific sword in its thickness. The longer a piece of metal is, or any material is, the floppier it would get. So in order for that rapier to have failed in that regard, one of two things happened. Either the tip was sharp or the blade was thick. In my opinion, as a bladesmith who has made blades and uses them in sparring untipped for the most part, and has never had an incident in the whole 4 years of sparring, I can tell you with certainty that the problem is the stiffness. Thanks for listening to this little video of mine. I hope that you enjoyed, and as always, fence on.